Hello and welcome back to the lecture on macroeconomics for managers. In this lecture, we're going to discuss macroeconomic models. We have been talking about the Phillips curve and we discussed how one Mr. William Philip actually got data from British economy for around 100 years and he has plotted something and where he has got the relationship between unemployment and unemployment and inflation as nominal inflation as something like this. So there's a clear-cut inverse relationship between the rate of unemployment and the nominal price, so the inflation. Okay, so let me write down inflation, and here I have unemployment. Now that's a fact. That's what you see from data, right? And we have all our assumptions and all our principles to kind of explain what really it means. And that is what we are going to do precisely in the next few minutes. We are going to sort of find out plausible explanations for this kind of relationship. I mean, if we have seen something in an economy for over 100 years, so probably something is there, and not just William Philip, but later on, other economists like Robert Solow, they also kind of got data from other economies and they plotted this data and they have seen kind of similar situation, similar kind of relationship. Now, that actually gives us a very interesting macroeconomic phenomena and it requires us as student of macroeconomics to think why exactly this phenomena is existing, right? And we will actually try to understand, basically we'll try to tease out all the possibilities from what we see here. So we will not get into immediately to the truth, but basically we'll try to understand what are the plausible truths, what are the possible alternatives basically. So let's say first let us take the demand side argument. Okay, I'll use a different color here. Let's say demand side argument. So I write demand. Okay, so what happens if I start tinkering with demand, how this inflation and unemployment relationship might change. So when I have my demand shift, so let me draw the diagram of supply demand curve that we use, that we have learned in tradition in our basic microeconomics. So we have a curve like this where I have, say, my demand curve is here. I'll use different colors. I will take the luxury to use it. And this is my supply curve. Okay, price and my quantity. Now suppose I have a change in demand. Suppose there is a shift in the demand curve, right? And if I draw the shift, if I get the shift here, suppose for some reason the demand has increased. All right, the moment my demand increases, what will happen is when the demand curve shifts to right, what will happen is I'll have a different market price for the product or service. So this is my P old and this is my P new, right? So earlier the quantity was less because the demand has increased, the supplier has incentive to produce more and supplier is producing more. Q0, Q old, and this is my Qn. So I'm assuming that the supplier has additional resources in his or her hand, like the labor or the capital to sort of deploy it and to increase the production. So what is happening is because the price is increasing, the supplier has an incentive to produce more, and supplier is producing more. And when supplier is producing more, it is actually he is actually deploying more labor, right? And when the supplier is deploying more labor, so labor is in demand. So when labor is in demand, so requirement of labor is increasing, so which would mean unemployment will decrease and the wages will increase, right? Wages will increase, right? So that's sort of a good thing, right, to happen. Like if unemployment is decreasing, wages is increasing, people are having a lot of buying power, and when people will have a lot of buying power, people will buy more. So sort of this demand curve will shift on the right, and it will kind of create some sort of a inflationary pressure. So it will create a inflationary pressure, right? So this demand curve shift will create, this will create, this will create an inflationary pressure. We also call it demand pool inflation. We also call this phenomena as demand pool inflation. All right. So this could be one phenomena that might explain the this kind of nature of Phillips curve. Now, this is always not the case. I mean, there are many other situations where your price may rise. So, just the next example we will take is the supply side phenomena. So, when I have my supply curve shifting to right or left, so something will happen. The prices will not remain constant. So, let's again use the demand curve and the supply curve. Now, let's say which are like some examples which are pretty common for supply curve shift. One, say the oil price rise. The oil price, this is an exogenous shock, right? You don't really have a control. Whatever happens in the OPEC or the Gulf countries, that will decide, or global politics, that will decide the change in oil price. Okay, or there might be drought. Okay, again, this is a weather phenomena. You really have no control over that. So, if in both the cases, what will happen is supply curve will shift to left, right? Supply curve will shift to left. And when the supply curve is shifting to left, supply curve mu, what is happening is I'm actually getting a new price which is higher than the previous price. So if that was my P old, this is my P new, and my quantity Q old, and this is my Q new. So what is happening is I'm producing in a lesser quantity, my price is high, but but people do not have additional purchasing power. People do not have additional purchasing power. So demand is actually, the quantity sold is less. So what is happening is, in turn, if I look at the Phillips curve, what will happen here is, so I am not able to deploy more resources or people. In fact, what may happen, I'm actually sort of like actually doing some layoff. I mean, I really can't afford to have so many people here, or I am actually reducing the wage. So many things are happening which are completely contrary to what you see in Phillips curve. So in these cases, what will happen is you will have high unemployment and high price, right? So it will be something like this: high unemployment, high price, which is contrary to what you see in Phillips curve. And actually, if we see the history of world economics, we will see this kind of phenomena was observed in 1970s. In 1970s, when the oil price sort of increased rapidly because of some political situation in Iran, and that actually led to this kind of situation where I had high unemployment as well as high inflation. So this is a totally different kind of scenario where I see things are happening which are not according to the Phillips curve, right? So we have to kind of look into all this plausible um, like sort of explanation of the things, okay, to sort of understand what is happening. If I add another phenomena, like say, let's say government is actually, the case 3, government is tinkering with fiscal or monetary policy. So just before, since we haven't really defined what is fiscal or monetary policy, so I'll say fiscal policy is where government spends money. It's basically, it deals with the public expenditure, where government is spending money from its own revenue. So that is from taxation. And monetary policy is, on the other hand, is basically where government decides to print how much money, to be on a very simple term. Okay. Now, government can print money. So if let's take the fiscal policy first. So let's say government is actually spending a lot of money. So let's say the COVID period is going on, and government really, you all understand that the tourism industry is really suffering, and let's say one economy is dependent on tourism industry, and government decides to spend a lot of money in tourism industry. So one way it can do is, say, it can provide some sort of like say to its employees, government employees, it can provide a say tourism bonus. Okay, let's say tourism bonus. So directly transferring money to your account and telling you that go and have a trip somewhere. Okay, it can do that. And so what will happen is, again, let us go back to our supply demand curve. That's basically the basic. So we'll try to use the same color. Say this is my price quantity framework. I have my supply curve and demand curve here. So the moment I give a tourism bonus, what will happen? My demand curve will shift to right. Okay, and automatically the price will rise. The more quantity of uh, a product or service is available now, and because people, tourism industry is opening up, it will open up, it will deploy more people, it will open up more hotels, it might go for creation of new infrastructure. So what will happen is your tourism industry will boost up, and that will, now if I translate it into Phillips curve, so what will happen in my Phillips curve is, my Phillips curve is here. Here I have inflation and unemployment. So because I'm sort of recruiting more people, I'm and also like because the prices are increasing, I'm also paying them more. So I'm not immediately coming to the wage part, because there is something a little other things, other factors we need to clarify before we talk about wage. But let's only say inflation and unemployment. So what will happen is the prices in the tourism industry will rise, and at this moment, if we assume that that is actually the wages are also proportionate to that, so then what will happen is I'm actually moving this way, right? So I'll have low unemployment, high inflation in tourism industry. So that is basically according to the Phillips curve. So that is the fiscal policy. So basically it is triggering. So basically it's saying the same thing is happening here. When I'm saying the case 3 is basically triggering case 1, right? When I'm basically triggering case 1, which is nothing but demand pull inflation. And by the way, I missed to say this. This is also known as cost push inflation. Cost push inflation. Okay, so these are two types of inflation, and this two type of inflation will have different implication on the Phillips curve. All right. All right. So similarly for monetary policy also. So in this case, government will simply print money, and government will pay this money to your account, right? So the rest of the mechanism will remain same. It can also happen that like government either using the fiscal policy or monetary policy, instead of paying to you directly, it can actually invest in infrastructure. It can also invest in infrastructure. So this is case 1 where it pays directly to the people, and there is a case 2 where it actually provides some sort of direct benefit to the hotel industry, direct say to customers, and here it is to the hotel industry. Okay, to the industry. So for example, it can just give some tax benefit, or it can give some benefit for say infrastructure development. So in all these cases we can show that, and I would tell you that you think through it. I'm not going to explain all of this. And you will see that the same mechanism, this Phillips curve, is going to operate. Development incentive, let's say incentive, and so forth. All right, so this is another case. Okay, so I'll end this lecture here, and I will finish the rest of this lecture in the next part.